From the heart of Southern Illinois, this is Roots of Leadership. Long-form conversations with the political figures shaping our region. Not just what they do, but who they are and how they got here. This episode is sponsored by the Little Nashville Cafe in downtown Marion, So Ill Cinema, and Swinford Media Group. 1940. Where is Lively Grove? Because I know where Oakville is. I know where Nashville is. I know that area. Where is Lively Grove?
Well, Lively Grove has a church and a store, and the rest is farm territory. It's not even incorporated. It is kind of well known for the store. My great grandfather built the store a long time ago, and a man by the name of Dave Waller runs it today and owns it today. And it's a kind of a general store. You won't find too many of these, and that's part of the reason, and maybe a big reason why a lot of people do know that area and Lively Grove, because they go there for either groceries or there's a great meat department, and then you can buy about anything you want there.
Gotcha.
And so it's up between, actually north of Coderville, about 8 or 10 miles, south of Oakville, about 8 or 10 miles. And so it's just a farm area. You don't even have to slow down to go through it.
Was your family still running it when you were a kid?
My great uncle ran it when I was a kid. Yes, and then sold it in the '60s to the Waller family, and so they've had it since the mid '60s.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So, 1940, Lively Grove. Tell me what life was like. Let me start with this, because I have heard no fewer than 20 different people pronounce your last name. So, how do you say your last name?
I guess if you were in Germany, they would call it Luchtefeld. Most people just say Luchtefeld.
Okay, I've heard an N in there before. Have you heard?
I have. I've heard a lot of different ones. Yes, a lot of different. When I was at St. Louis U, I played on the basketball team there, and they would announce it. If you scored or something. I didn't score a whole lot, by the way. But anyway, when you scored, they would say Luchtefeld, and so that is sort of most people say that.
Okay, all right. So, 1940s. Lively Grove. What's life like at the beginning?
Well, first of all, I was born in 1940, so I wouldn't know. But it was just really a mainly German community of farmers, and life was different. Farms were small. Very few people when I was a kid had more than 160 acres, and the reason is you couldn't farm more than 160 acres because you had either a small tractor or horses. And, you just couldn't get it done. Families were large. For one reason was if you had kids over a period of 15 years or so, they could help you farm more. Most everybody had a dairy. So life was slow. We never went anyplace because we were on a dairy farm. So
siblings? Did you?
I have two brothers, Gerald and Stanley. Both we are. My mother was a very busy lady for a while. I am. My one brother is 82. My other one is 83, and I am 84. So she had 3 little boys that I'm sure she had her hands full.
Wow. So you. School in Lively Grove, or when did you go to Oakville?
To be real honest with you, my dad was shortly after the Depression. Jobs were hard to come by. My dad, when he got married in 1939, stayed on the farm with his dad, my grandpa, and helped farm, looking for a job. In fact, he found a job for a while at least with the state. On building highways. There was a road, 153 goes through Lively Grove towards Coderville, and he helped build that road. Finally found a job in Department of Corrections, but couldn't get on down here. He had to go to Joliet. In Joliet, he stayed there for a few months, and then finally an opening occurred in Menard in Chester. So we moved out of my grandparents' house and down to Chester. We stayed there for about 6 years until my grandfather retired. When he retired, I was 8 years old, and we moved on the farm. And my brother still lives on the farm. He just retired a few years ago. Now lives there and rents the land out. So it's still in the family.
That's
and
great.
it's just a neat little place. But life was slow and certainly different than it is now.
Now, did your dad commute to Menard, or did he stop?
No, we moved to Chester.
Okay.
We moved to Chester, and once my grandfather retired in 1948, he quit and we moved on the farm. My grandfather built a house right next door, and that house is still there. It's rented out, but it is, as I said, I try to tell my kids how different life is today. Traveling 100 miles means nothing. I was probably when I was a young boy before I went to high school. I think I was in St. Louis 1 or 2 times. That's as far as we got away from home. Because of dairy, you have to milk them morning and night every day, and so we were pretty close to home.
So, school then. I think I'd read a couple of things about your schooling at this age, but what was that like?
Well, I first went to the first 3 years until I was 8 years old in Chester, at St. Mary's in Chester. And then once we moved on the farm, there was a little bitty Catholic school there in Lively Grove. There were 40 kids in the school, 2 rooms. It was taught by nuns, and 20 in each room. So it was there too. It was a whole different lifestyle. We walked to school every day, about a half a mile, and it was. But you know what? We didn't really think it was that tough because everyone else did the same thing we did. They had dairy. They lived on a farm. They were, we didn't have indoor plumbing at all, water, toilet, air conditioning, none of that. But no one did. So it was just the standard of the time.
So athletics, obviously, as we continue on in your story, played a big part in a lot of your life. When you were going to that school, were you playing against older kids then who were in that same school? Did you realize I really enjoy this and I seem to be a little bit better than these kids?
Well, first of all, I owned a baseball and a bat, and we listened to Harry Carey on the radio. So baseball was really that was my sport. My 8th grade year, a priest came to Lively Grove Parish who liked sports also, and he started a basketball team. Now, when you think of a basketball team, it's different than today's world. We played outside on cinders. He scheduled a few games, and when he did, we played. Well, one was in a little town called Oakdale, which we played in an old store that had been closed. You didn't want to shoot with too much arch; it hit the ceiling. A stove at both ends of the floor. I mean, that sounds like it's impossible, but you know what? Again, as I say, it was sort of standard. We didn't get much. So I only played didn't own a basketball. Probably played maybe 6 or 7 games my 8th grade year, and then went to Oakville High School.
Had the kids at Oakville played basketball more then?
Oh yes,
so were you kind of behind the curve?
The Lively Grove there wasn't obviously wasn't much there, especially in the line of sports. No, they had basketball and baseball and had a high school team. It's a little town of about 1,500 people, and the school ranged maybe 150 to 200. But they had a great school team, and so it was a little bit different, except that I was 6'5" as a freshman and 145 pounds. Now think about that, 145 pounds. I was so thin that I was ashamed to actually put on a pair of shorts. And the older kids gave me a hard time when I went, but I hadn't, as I said, I'd only played 7 or 8 ball games and didn't own a basketball. But being tall like I was, obviously the coach came out to my dad and talked my dad into letting me play.
So how did you then? How far were you from Oakville?
We were 13 miles from Oakville, and we had one vehicle, an old Plymouth, 49 Plymouth, and you know, if you think about it, we didn't have a pickup truck. We didn't have a truck. If finally I drove to school. But, you know, when I drove to school, there was nothing at home for my mother to use or whatever. So it's, a different life, but no one else had much better.
So your parents' willingness, I would say, to let you play sports came at a bit of a sacrifice then as far as...
Very much so. You know, Dad and Mom both, you know, had to do stuff that most people don't do today. You know, my mom got up in the morning we got up at 5 o'clock every morning to milk, and she got up and built a fire in the kitchen stove for heat and for cooking. Dad went out and milked. As soon as I was old enough, and by the time I was 8, which was when we moved, I was probably old enough to go out and help, and did help feed and help milk and that sort of thing. And as my 2 brothers got older, they too got involved in the milking, would get up early. We did it all before we went to school. You know, the bus would come by probably around 7:45, and by that time we were finished milking. We had everything cleaned up, and we had eaten breakfast, and we were ready to go. So it was it just was a lot of work, but I think it was good for us. Obviously, we learned to work. And then, of course, as I got a little older, then I got my driver's license and was able to drive to school and come home from practice and games and things like that.
But you were still getting up at 5, milking cows, going to school, and then doing practice or a game, and then coming home and going to bed, waking up, and doing that all over again? Absolutely.
It was, and came home at maybe 5:30 and milked, and we started over the next day. One of the tough part of that life, that time in life, was my dad got tuberculosis when I was a junior. Now he has a son who's a junior, a son who is a sophomore, and a son who is no, I was a junior. My brother was a freshman. My youngest brother was in the 8th grade, and. We milked before we milked my mom and my mother, and my grandpa kind of helped. He lived real close. We milked before we went to school, did all that work before we went to school. He was in a sanatorium, you know, and they're very infectious, and so he spent several months in a sanatorium. We did the milking at that time, come home after practice. Guess what we did? We milked again. So it was, it was a tough time. I have to give my mom an awful lot of credit. She helped us get through all of that, and Dad came home finally, and was never really had a problem after that.
Gotcha. So if I can hit pause on the story, at this point, did you have any political ambition? Was anything hit, or was that really a later in life thing?
Well, first of all, my dad was a Republican and I think conservative, obviously, but no, he talked politics to maybe other people. We heard it, we listened, but no, that was as far from my idea was, I wanted to be, from the time I was 3 years old, I wanted to be a Major League Baseball pitcher. That was my goal in life. And so, no, I never thought about being a politician at all, and never thought about really getting into politics until way late in life, to be real honest with you. I mean, then it's not something, and I kind of got into that by accident.
Well, I can't wait to get to that. So back to high school then. When did you really, I mean, obviously you were, if you were playing baseball, you were an athletic, tall guy. When did your aptitude for basketball really take off, since it wasn't something that you grew up with?
Well, obviously I wasn't very good when I was a freshman. Loved it, obviously. Baseball, loved it, played all I could. We had a goal on the barn that we used a little bit, and but I just and I had two really good coaches in high school. A fellow by the name of Wayne Nelson, my freshman and sophomore year, and then Rich Herron. And a lot of people are not aware that Rich Herron started out at Oakville.
I had no idea until you just
said that.
Is that
right?
That. Yeah.
And he came out of McKendree College, and he was 4 years at Oakville, my junior and senior year. Rich Herron was he was ahead of his time. He spent, many times in that age, the coaches, all right, we need a coach. Which one of the teachers want to coach? That sort of thing. They weren't as professional as they are today. Rich Herron was professional back then. He wanted to play all the time in baseball and basketball, and in particular in basketball. He coached both sports, the only coach we had, but he wanted to do it year round, and he kind of got us motivated to do a lot of that same stuff. I was 6'7" by the time I was a sophomore, and had gained some weight. And by that time, I started on the varsity and played then the rest of the time. And my younger brother Stanley was 2 years behind me, but he was pretty mature, and he started already. He was 6'5" as a sophomore, and he could play. And then I had another brother, Gerald, who was an eighth grader, a freshman at that time, and he could play. So we all were on the same team.
So I didn't know Rich Herron coached baseball. That's another.
I'm not too sure that he was too excited about baseball, but he whatever he did, he wanted to win, and if you're going to go out and spend a lot of time at it, and you're going to work at it, might as well work enough to try to win. I mean, it's I always felt that as a coach. If I asked my kids to work their tails off to win, then it was my job to work my tail off to win too. And and then if you do that and you lose, you can live with that. But that was he. As I said, Rich Herron was more of a professional coach, and he taught, I think, biology, and but he worked at it full time.
So we get to the end of high school. Then I'm guessing earlier in your life you didn't think a whole lot about college and whatnot if you grew up in a farm in Lively Grove, but right. But SLU comes into the picture here.
Well, I was recruited fairly heavy. I visited Northwestern, University of Illinois, SIU, St. Louis U. There were about three other schools that I.
What did that look? What did it look like to be recruited then?
Well, you kind of get used to that. I mean, at that time, the phone never quit ringing, and I'm sure that happened. That happens today too. I think there are more set rules on when they can call and when they can't in today's world. But back then, it was you could, and so there was somebody by the house almost every day, and at school. Visited those other schools and was impressed with a lot of them. Had a number of other Big Ten schools call. I never visited, but only I think 5 or 6 of them. But it was really a busy time, And of course, you're kind of excited. You're just a kid, and you're, hey, these people they're interested in you. Well, there's a reason that they want you, and so it was. It was fun, but it was busy. I'm sure it drove my folks kind of crazy. I don't know whether they had that they knew that I was going to go to college, but certainly once this started, there was no doubt about it. I was going to go to college and play basketball. But one of the things that I made it very clear to all of those coaches, and you could do this in those days, and that is play more than one sport. Today they want you to do it year round. But I've said, hey, if I can't play baseball, then I don't want to come. So, but most of them agreed to do that. In fact, there's a few that still do it. One of my sons, I had 3 sons that played Division I basketball, and they had a daughter, And one of my sons played Division I baseball at the same time. But that's a tough schedule. It really is.
I have 3 sons and a daughter.
Is that right?
And my boys are baseball
and
players.
You're young. You may have several more.
You don't
think?
Those days are done. So what? To quickly hit baseball, what at that point, you said you wanted to be a major league pitcher, but were you a first baseman at that point?
I was a pitcher.
You were a pitcher?
I was a pitcher, and I was big, and I threw pretty hard, and played on a men's team at a pretty young age. In those days, almost every little town had a baseball team of men who come back from pro ball, or they maybe were, played in high school, played in college, whatever. So I played as much as I possibly could, but I was I didn't hit too well, but I was a pitcher, and that's what I hoped to someday do. And had a couple things happen to me accident-wise that ended that hope at certain parts of my life, and finally you can't do it, so you got to look for something else.
So you graduate, go to SLU. What did you start with your final major, or did your major change along the way?
Well, my major, I really thought about, my major was history and government, and I really thought about, my main goal, of course, was being a professional player. But as time went by, first of all, I hurt my arm in between my junior and senior year. And after that, I never threw very hard. And, they didn't fix arms back then. And if you don't throw very hard, even though I had an opportunity to sign on a number of occasions to professional teams, I probably wouldn't have made the big time, and not many kids do make the big time. But I still had hopes of it. But as I said, I hurt my arm, and that if you don't throw hard enough, they're not going to be that interested.
Sure. So you did start in government and history as your...
I did, and I wanted to then go be a lawyer.
Okay.
I wanted to be a lawyer, and with a government and history major, you can do that. Got out of high school. And a job open. One of my friends said, "Hey, the coach at the." And by the way, I did take a minor in education, and psychology of all things. But he told me, "Hey, the coach quit at the high school. Why don't you look at that?" So I did, and decided to do it, and maybe for a while, or go back to school or whatever. But it didn't take long. In fact, I would say after the first month of coaching and teaching history and government, there's no doubt what I was going to do. I really enjoyed it, and I stayed after it. I coached for the next 38 years. Mm-hmm.
What drew you to history and government? Was it just something in you, or was that, even if you weren't thinking about politics, mm-hmm. was there something about it that was just appealing or interesting to you?
Well, I liked history in high school, plus the fact that I think the government was part of listening some time when my dad would talk to people about how things are going on the national level or the state level. He was not involved in politics, other than he was really paid attention to what was going on. And so I think that was part of it.
So you graduate from SLU. Now, is this Oakville where the coach had quit? And you?
I graduated from Oakville High School, yes.
But that was your one and only job?
Well, went to St. Louis University because two things. One, I used to listen to Harry Carey on the radio in baseball, and Jack Buck. And they did the Billiken games, the St. Louis University games at that time. Harry Carey and Jack Buck.
I had no idea.
So that was, and it was close to home. When you're young and you don't get to many places, I was a little afraid, I think, to go very far from home. And so I think from the very beginning, I was going to go to St. Louis U.
Now, forgive me if my timelines are off, but were Harry Carey and
Jack Buck still doing Billiken games when you played there?
Oh, yeah.
So you got to at least meet them?
Oh, yeah. We used to ride with them on the bus.
Really?
Or the airplane, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any good Harry Carey stories?
Well, Harry Carey was kind of a rough character. Jack Buck was a classy guy. He really was, and I think if you ever watched him or heard about him or read about him, he was a really professional. And obviously Harry Carey was a professional. He was a little rough. He enjoyed drinking and smoking, and he then went, shortly after that, went to the Cubs and was there for years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm finding out all kinds of interesting things.
Yeah, you know, those are people that, my hero in life was my folks, obviously, but was Sam Musial. And I got to know him because they worked out in our gym at St. Lucie. Plus the fact that our trainer was a Dr. Bob Bowman, who was again written several books, was one of the real founders of the training business, and he was also the Cardinal trainer. So they came down there in the off season to work out, and Sam Musial, and that's how I kind of got to know him a little bit. I often, and this is kind of a funny story, but one day I'm working out on my own on a Saturday, and here comes Sam Musial through the gym to go see Doc Bowman. Well, I finished my workout, and he went upstairs and played handball with Doc Bowman. So I'm in the shower, and guess who walked in?
Stan Musial.
So I often tell people I showered with Stan Musial. had one. So I knew him just a little bit, yeah.
Well, that had to be really neat, being a baseball guy at heart, to be around those players at such a young age. Anytime I'm around a professional athlete, I'm not the size of a professional athlete as you are, but it always amazes me the size and strength that's so much greater than you even see on the television, and that had to be neat to see these guys up close.
Well, they obviously have great coordination. Without that, they don't go anyplace, and stronger than they really look, and have the ability to get it done. You know, that above and beyond the average person out there.
That's phenomenal story. So you exit SLU. Were there any basketball opportunities post SLU?
As a player?
Yes.
I was not a great college player. In fact, I only started a few games in college, played quite a bit my junior year when we really had a great year. We won the Kentucky Invitational Tournament, beat Kentucky in the final game, played quite a bit of that game. Then we went to the NIT, and at the National Invitational Tournament, it was all played at Madison Square Garden. And it was played over a 2-week period, and it probably was bigger and better than the NCAA at that time. A lot of times, in fact, finally the NCAA made it a requirement that if you won the conference, you had to go to the NCAA. But the NIT was big, and we won second my junior year. Providence beat us by about three or 4 points in my junior in my junior year. So that was big time. That was really big. And senior year we didn't have, but I was more of a substitute than I was a big time player. In high school, I'm sure they thought I was going to be, but I played center in high school. Strictly played center. In those days, centers didn't dribble the ball. You know, they didn't shoot from out. They didn't do and then when I got to college, I'm a 6'7" kid who don't jump a whole lot, playing against 6'11" and 7-footers who weighed 290 pounds. That was tough. That was tough. It was just a different world. I was not used to facing a basket. I could shoot it, but you have to get open to shoot. And so I was not a great college player, but it was a wonderful experience.
So when you played in the NIT, you say it was a 2-week period. Did you stay in New York that whole
No,
time?
we'd fly up on a Thursday and play. I think there were only 16 teams in the NIT at the time, and then fly home and then go back the next week. Yeah.
So maybe you had it in previous years traveling to play basketball, but going there with that experience, a kid from Lively Grove who had not been too far from the area, what was playing in Madison Square Garden and being in New York City like?
Well, not only just going and playing in Madison Square Garden, but riding on an airplane. The farthest I had been away from home was probably St. Louis, and that's about 50 miles. Until I got, I did get to St. Louis a couple of times. I think I went to one Cardinal game. I saw one high school basketball game before I went to high school. Those are things that but it was exciting, no doubt. We flew every place. We're in, it was the toughest conference in the country at the time. The Missouri Valley was considered the best basketball conference in the country. We had some great players. Oscar Robertson, which you probably have heard of. Mm-hmm. Many people today wouldn't know. Jerry West. We played in fact, a couple of newspapers predicted that we played the toughest schedule in the country my senior year. So we played them all, traveled all over. So it was a big time, and it was exciting. Yeah.
So the first time you flew was with the team then?
Oh yeah.
Were you scared? Did you pretend like
I still don't like to ride on an airplane. First of all, I'm not built for it. I'm just a little big for it. But I'm not real excited about riding on an airplane. I've obviously done that quite a bit, but the only place we didn't fly to that I remember would be that we played was Bradley. We drove up there on the bus.
Gotcha. All right. So college days end, pro dreams are set aside or don't look like they're going to happen, and you wind up back at Oakville, beginning what would become can I say double Hall of Fame career? Is that fair?
Well,
I think it's technically fair.
Whatever. I often say if you stay in it long enough, they'll give you an award someplace.
So were you immediately coaching baseball and football?
No, baseball and basketball.
Or sorry, not football.
That's all we had was 2 sports, and I was the only coach. That was tough. That was tough because you had a lot of kids to deal with. You couldn't do the kind of job that you'd like to do. And so, I was the only coach that first year. Then they got a volunteer coach finally for a short time. And then, in fact, my first real coach was a fellow from Marion here by the name of John Kent. I don't know if you've ever heard that name.
I don't believe so.
But John Kent was an all-stater, played here at Marion, was all-tournament at Centraeus Holiday Tournament. And he stayed there for a year and then came back here and I think coached here at the grade school for a lot of years. But
right.
He was from Marion. But no, I did it by myself. The facilities weren't very good. The gym was a decent gym for that era. The ball diamond was pretty well dilapidated, but I really worked at it. I think I spent more time than most coaches. And you kind of get that from Rich Herron. He spent more time than most coaches.
So when you say you spent more time, what did that mean back then? Because now you can go to every coaching clinic in the world. You can look up anything you want on YouTube to say, how do I defend against,
right.
You could find that information, the click of a button. What was it like to put in that work? How did that play out, and what was that for you?
Well, first of all, as I said, when I first started, there weren't a lot of professional coaches. But that changed gradually. In fact, I was in a period I started in 1962 and quit in 2000. So I saw a real change in the game. The coaches there are very few coaches that don't know the X and O's today. All of them have played basketball. All of them have gone to all the, many of them played in college. All of them have had good coaches. All of them have, they've seen it all. They do it year round, and they do summer clinics and things like that. So coaching is pretty darn good today compared to it was when I started. There are very few coaches that don't really know how to coach, and very few coaches, if they want to survive, that aren't professional.
So do you think your time playing in college gave you a leg up because you would have had just more of an education in it, or were there books, or would you call other coaches, or?
Oh, I think I had a better start than most because I played in college with a outstanding college coach by the name of John Bennington. He left St. Louis and went to Michigan State and died there. But I had a much better, I played the game as a high school, as a college player, with good coaching, in big time basketball. And no, I felt like I was at that time ahead of young coaches at least. And there were some really good coaches, don't get me wrong, but no, I had a good start. I finally got an assistant. That helped out a lot, took a lot of pressure off. I can remember my very first ball game, never will forget it, coaching. It was against Columbia. We got beat 64-25. And I thought, why am I doing this? I'm on the bus with a headache going home. But that changed as time went by, and got good help as assistant. I ended up with an assistant coach that was probably as good as anything in the state of Illinois. He stayed with me for 30 years.
Wow.
How many assistant coaches? A fellow by the name of Mike Smith was his name. And Mike didn't want to be a head coach. He had been a head coach and had a kind of a bad experience. He didn't want to be a head coach. And so he was outstanding. He and I thought a lot alike about the game, and he was willing to do about anything. If I wasn't there, he could get it done. And that made a heck of a difference in my life.
What were you like on the sideline, and did that change over time?
I don't think it changed much at all. The coaches John Bennington, who was a coach in college, he didn't rant and rave. Rich Herron didn't really rant and rave. He complained, but he got up and he, let referees know they make mistakes, and they don't mind. The good ones don't mind to be pointing that out. In fact, I think coaches should point that out. That was a bad call. But I never wanted to be a rant and raver, and so I didn't want technicals. I think in my lifetime of about 40 years of coaching, I think I had 4 technicals in my lifetime. Not many coaches can say that.
Did any of them lead to you getting thrown out?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
So
In
never
fact,
thrown out of a game?
No, not even close. I didn't know. If I was upset with a coach, and my coach in college did this, and all of the referees knew it, I walked to the other end of the bench and sat down. And if you talk to any coach that coached, any referee that refed at that time, they knew exactly why I was going to the other end of the bench. They didn't mind that, and I'd sit down, and then I'd come back. And I would say to them sometimes, that was a terrible call, when they got close enough that they could hear me. And they knew that, I wouldn't want to ref. That's a tough job. They knew the good ones know they make mistakes. So, no, I never really rant and raved much at all. And I didn't want a lot of technicals. And 2 of the technicals that I got, the referees called because they thought I was hollering at them, and I was actually hollering at the kids, at one of my kids on the floor, from across the floor, do this or whatever. And they had their back to me, and 2 of them called and apologized. So no, I didn't want them, and I guess I always different coaches do it different ways, and they're successful some rant and rave and they're successful, some don't and they're successful. So there's not just one way to do it. I just didn't want it to be considered somebody who did a lot of hollering, and because I didn't think it helped much. Kids knew when I was upset, and I'm not going to put up with that. You're going to make a change, or we're going to make a change somehow. So no, I just didn't do it.
Is it worth asking if you ever got thrown out of a baseball game? Because I'm guessing.
No, never even close. I never even came close. Baseball, same way. If you're refereeing and I think, and I'm sitting in the dugout, and you call a strike on a ball that I could see better than you could, whether it was low or not, or high from the sidelines, I might say that was low, or that was high, or that was a strike. At least it wasn't low. You know what I mean? No, I never came close that I know of to ever being thrown out of a game, and just didn't want to. I just thought it. I've always felt this, but coaches can do it in different ways and be successful. I don't criticize them. I didn't want to. I just felt that if coaches couldn't control themselves, how did they ask their players to control themselves? And so I tried to always be under control.
So, not to make any of this about me, but a funny story on my end. My high school football coach, we used to joke because every game he would yell at the officials, "That's the worst call I've seen in 20 years of high school football." Every game. And when I was an assistant coach in Marion when I first moved here, and coached under Kerry Martin, who is a Hall of Fame just individual as well as coach, and a good friend to this day. And I thought when I started coaching that's how you did it. It's really not my temperament. It was just all that I knew. And I was amazed at how I told players when I was very young how good they had it, because I didn't even know you could run a program that wasn't over the top, getting thrown out or almost thrown out. So, but I will say the legacy that you have, I guess I'm not surprised that you were 23 and didn't want to get thrown out of games. You've commanded respect in every area of life you've been in, and I shouldn't be shocked because I didn't know if you'd say, when I was 24, I was a hothead, but your temperament seems to be something that it has been valuable to you, but it's been valuable to everybody who's been around you for years.
Well, you hope so. But as I say, I've seen coaches who holler a lot and they win a lot. I just never wanted to do that, and I just thought it was inconsistent to ask your kids to be under control, and we all want our kids to be under control. All of our players. We don't want them hollering at the refs. We don't want them acting like an idiot. Yet some coaches don't seem to do. Little Bobby Knight, for instance, I always go back, but he paid a price in the end. Finally.
So as you look at, we'll start with basketball then. If you could, and you probably can't whittle it down to one game. So you can give me a couple, but what's your favorite game you ever coached in?
Well, you'll find out if you do it a long time that you remember the real bad losses better than you remember the big wins. We had some really tough losses. We lost a game in the state championship game against a team out of East St. Louis area in a state championship game. It was 2A basketball, and we went down to the final game, scores tied, and all of a sudden the referee from the other side of the floor, with 5 seconds to go, called a foul on our player. Now we have videotape of it. They're just leaning against each other. Called a foul. Kid made 2 free throws, and we lost state championship. That's a tough loss. It was so bad that the head of the IHSA, the director of the IHSA, knocked on our shower room door, asked me to come out in the hallway, and said, I apologize. That's the worst call I've ever seen. And I can't change it, but you lost the state championship very likely because of it. The score was tied, and the kid wasn't. The kid with the ball was right in front of the bench, and I think he lost control at that time. So we'd at least gone into overtime. But it's tough to lose a game, but it's tough to lose one in the state championship game. Lost a game. We're playing Benton in SIU Arena. There are 9,000 people there, and we're in the super sectional. And we get fouled at the buzzer.
I hear a little laugh from over here.
We get fouled at the buzzer. Our player gets fouled on a layup at the buzzer. He has 2 free throws. If he makes both of them, we go to state tournament. If he makes one of them, we're tied. And if he misses both of them, we don't go to state tournament because the buzzer went off shortly after he missed and got fouled. Rich Herron called 2 straight timeouts. It gave. I swore there were 9,000 people behind our basket. They had to push the people back, and the boy missed 2 free throws. Good free throw shooter. Wasn't his fault. If we'd have made another free throw some other time, we'd have won the game anyway. So, but that was a tough loss. Those are 2 tough losses. Big losses, big wins. We won when we were all one class. In 1970, there was 750 schools played. We're in the Elite 8, and we go to state tournament as a Class 1A basketball team, and we got beat, but we won in Mount Vernon. We won at Carbondale on 2 free throws. We beat Mount Vernon to go to state, and that was all one class. So that was big. There's no doubt about that. So there's some big losses and some big wins. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Who were some, when you think back on basketball and baseball, who were some of the players that you had who really stand out to you, and maybe not even for athletic reasons, but?
Well, one of the one that you have to mention first was in 1970. We had a boy by the name of Gale Wolf, who was 7 foot tall, played at Missouri University. He was, kind of gave us the attitude. He and some kids who played with him, that we could win against the big schools. We beat Centralia, we beat Mount Vernon, then we go to state. And that was big. We had another player on that team, actually 2 players on that team who played when one was recruited by Memphis State, 6'6" kid by the name of Jim Schroeder, and then a Bill Winkleman who was recruited by Quincy. We had there've been one really good player that I didn't coach. I'd retired already, by the name of Frederick King, who played at Evansville, Indiana. So we had a lot of kids who went on to junior college and colleges, yeah. Obviously you get closer to some kids than others. You don't necessarily want to show that so much, but some just, they just catch your attention because they work their tail off, and maybe they don't even get to play. Maybe they aren't a starter. Some of my best friends over the years have been kids who really weren't starters. Now that might sound silly, but I really got to appreciate those kids because without them, you don't go anyplace. They come every night and work their tail off, and in the process, what do they get out of it? And that's kind of hard to find. And then parents who will accept that. That's without those kids, you don't have a team. And a lot of those people are very good friends of mine.
Well, so just to wrap that section up, baseball 506 wins, basketball 711. Those numbers sound right?
Basketball?
Yes.
738, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, ChatGPT was wrong for me today.
Baseball, I don't know, but it was over 500. I don't know.
That is, I mean, it's a wonderful, humorous way to put it, to say if you play long enough, but you also won a whole lot more games than you lost. And just because you were standing there on the sidelines or in a dugout, it doesn't make that happen. And that's amazing.
I often say I lost. I'm the losingest coach at Oakville High School in its history. but you're right. But if you stay with it, now you're not going to stay with it if you don't have some success. There's no doubt. Coaches, a lot of them don't stay with it very long, and I liked it. I liked it a lot, and probably if I hadn't have been in the Senate, would have probably continued to coach for a while more. Yes.
So where does the intersection happen? Because you wind up, and you can talk about how the appointment happened in 1995, appointed to the Senate while you were still coaching basketball. Were you still teaching at that point?
No, I'd retired.
Okay.
I'd had 2 bouts with cancer, and I retired kind of early because there was an early retirement buyout that I could retire from teaching, and was afraid that the cancer might come back. So I retired after 34 years of teaching. And you could do it at that time. And so that's why I retired, but I remained the coach at the Oakville High School. And then I coached that one more year, kind of just played golf and coached, and was athletic director. And then in 1995, I had a phone call and said, would you coach the McDonald All-American team? You've heard of that team.
Of course.
And I said, I sure will. If you'll coach, McDonald's picks the top 22 kids in the United States, and I coached the West team, and it was held in St. Louis that year. So anyway, it was a big deal.
Who was on the team?
Well, people like Kevin Garnett. Have you ever heard of him? Paul Pierce.
Indeed.
A couple other, Chauncey Billups. I read an article just some time ago that said it was the best graduating class in the history of McDonald's All-Americans. More of them made Hall of Fame category. I think about 9 or 10 of them made Hall of Fame. So there were several other names that don't come to my mind right now that you would recognize. That was quite an experience.
That's neat.
But those kids, do they think better than the kids you coach? Not necessarily. Do they shoot better? Not necessarily. They're just men. They're boys in men's bodies. It's unreal what they can do. I mean, 6'11", jump out of the gym, quick, strong, physically way ahead of most high school kids. But when that happened, the news media from St. Louis University, or from St. Louis, came out in a big way because it was held in St. Louis that year, and they knew me because I played there. My brother played at St. Louis U, and I had 3 kids that played there: Jeff, Ryan, and my daughter Donna. My son Keith played at Illinois Wesleyan. But the newspaper people knew me, and they came out, did stories, TV came. It was a big deal. One of the newspapermen came in the house and said, in one of the interviews, so he was there about an hour. I knew him beforehand. As he left, he said, "Coach, you're too young to retire. What would you do if you didn't coach?" And I said to him, I've always liked government. The next day in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, it said, Luchtefeld wants to get into government. Senator Frank Watson, who's a sports nut, read that article and knew that the senator from my district was going to retire because his wife was sick, and no one knew it yet, but that he was going to quit, and they have to appoint somebody. He said, "Would you take that job?" And I said, No way. I never thought about taking that job.
So you weren't a precinct committee person, or like the traditional,
No.
They've been waiting in the wings. This just kind of happened?
It just absolutely happened. If he hadn't read the article, I'd have never been a senator.
Wow.
But he read the article, and I said, "No, I'm not interested." But he must have felt that it wasn't a no-no, you know what I mean? So he called, I think, about 15 days in a row. And each day we'd talk, and I'd say, no, it's too much work. It's too, my life is perfect. I'm coaching, I'm athletic director, and I'm playing golf 5 days a week. That's a pretty good life. But finally you get to the idea, and my wife, who has been, without her, I'm no one, but she said, you got to tell him for sure, one way or another. You can't lead him on like this. So I said, well, what do I do? She said, well, you do what you want to do. I'm with you 100%, whatever you want to do. And she said that a dozen times probably. And finally she said, why don't you do this? Why don't you force yourself to answer him? Set up a day that you will meet him in his office and you will tell him what you're going to do. So I called him. I said, I'll meet you next Wednesday and I'll let you know what I'm going to do. When I headed to Greenville, which is where he was home, I stopped in Carlisle, right in front of the high school, pulled off the side of the road and called my wife and said, what should I tell him? And she said, whatever you want to do. So I went, and I think you get to the point where, and I think I would advise people to do this. Retirement's not that great. You only live once. Get out of life everything you can. And I realized as time went by, I was only going to live once. And this was an opportunity that was never going to come along again. So I told him I'd do it. And that's why I became a state senator.
Now part of, to infuse the politics of it a little bit, because this winds up in a very competitive race a year later. So they needed someone not just to put in there, but they needed someone that they thought could hold the seat. And so by saying yes, you didn't just say yes to being appointed as a senator. You said yes to your first political campaign, which was a huge deal in a very competitive race. So so for anybody who's listening, when you get a phone call that says, would you like to be an Illinois senator? And they think, why would anybody say no? There was a lot on the other side of this that wasn't all going to be easy.
Right. And from the beginning, if you're going to do it right, and I've tried to do things right, it's going to be a lot of work. You're going to have to raise money. You're going to have to be away from home a lot. You're going to have to put up with a lot. It's just going to be a full-time job. I mean, you're not going to play golf every day, and likely you may have to quit your job that you're doing that you liked. That's what kept me away, kept me from saying yes. Is that it was just, do I want to go through this? And it happened to be a Democratic district, which I did not know, and so it was something that I knew was going to be very difficult. And you knew that it's going to take full time, night and day, 7 days a week. Do you want to do that? But finally, the other part overrules the idea that you only live one time, and this is an opportunity. And I always liked government, don't get me wrong. I followed it religiously. I watched, I read, I listened to state, in particular federal government, because you don't see much about state government on TV. Mm-hmm. So no, this was next to, it was maybe the toughest decision I ever made in my life, because I really wasn't sure, but it turned out to be a correct decision. It was even though politics is not sometimes a very nice business, it is. I learned a lot, and I was able to help some people, and it was interesting as heck. Yes. Mm.
So you take the appointment. So you came in midstream. You didn't get sat with a new class.
I did. I came in right in the middle of the term, right during the veto session in September. After the McDonald's All-American game, and I didn't. And of course, why did he call me? He called me you're right about the fact they want to win that seat. Mm-hmm. And I was fairly well known in that whole district from coaching. And so that was, and they knew that, one thing you better be in politics, you better be competitive, because people are going to come after you. I never received a lot of criticism, and I was lucky in that regard. But but they knew I was competitive, and they knew that people knew me, and I was able to be in front of people. As far as speaking is concerned, teaching and coaching, you're always in front of people. So it was, I think they thought that I had a good shot at maybe winning.
So that cycle then, your first campaign, you're already an appointed senator, but you immediately, so you get seated in September of 95, and the general election is November of 96.
96.
So you were a senator, but you were also in a campaign almost immediately.
Immediately. And of course, they're going to help you. I mean, they're going to, I knew more than maybe a young guy 30 would know, as far as government is concerned and how it works in politics and that sort of thing. But when you get to Springfield, you don't even know where the bathroom's at. And so there's a lot to learn, there's no doubt. But they're gonna try to help you. They have staff that'll help you. And you knew it was going to be expensive, but they'll help you raise money. And it turned out to be the most expensive Senate race in the history of the state of, I think, in the United States, as far as state Senate race. We raised about $800,000 for that race, which was huge back in 1995, 96, 97. But we worked at it. We knew it was going to be a tough race, because my opponent was a lady she actually was from Chester. She was a teacher at SIU Carbondale, a professor of Illinois history. So, and she was attractive. She was very articulate. I didn't know all of that, by the way, until I got to know her. But it was a handful. It was tough. There's no doubt about it. But we worked at it, and then we finally won by 127 votes.
I was going to say, but that story then wasn't over, because in Illinois the Senate terms are 4, 4, and 2,
right?
And so you had, like a rep, you had to run again. And I
did.
And who did you run against in that one?
Her again.
Same.
And
so,
this time was not hard, because I'd gotten to know the people and they knew me. I worked at it. I've often thought the best way to campaign is just work at your job. And if people call, you call back. And if people want to meet with you, you meet with them. And people appreciate that. And so that's kind of what I did. And then I worked at it very hard. By the way, one of the things that made it even tougher was that I asked them, can I continue to coach? And I coached for 5 years as a state senator. Now that was tough. That's where your wife is really big, to put up with that and go with you and all that sort of stuff. And then I had an assistant coach that I mentioned earlier by the name of Mike Smith, who was great. I mean, when I wasn't there, he was. And he knew what we wanted to do. And so I coached for 5 years. And in 2000, I finally decided that I couldn't. You finally wear down. If you're going to do both of those jobs, you better put your heart and soul in them. And it's hard to do for a long period of time. But I did it for 5 years, and so in 2000, I decided that I'm not going to do it. I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit coaching, and just then I remained the coach from 2000 to 2017.
So
for 21 years.
So really quickly, in that late 90s, early 2000s, when you had your annual Christmas event, who was the best entertainment that you ever had at those events?
In fact, we had this young kid who could do it all. I'll tell you, he could do it
Oh,
all.
okay.
His parents were so proud of him. And the Smith family. And you had a sister, I think, and two other brothers.
Yep,
and
one
other
brother.
brother.
Yep.
And your folks. And just great people. And we had a Christmas party, and they did our Christmas party. And when people would get done, they would say, bring them back next year. So we had a good time.
So for me, that was some of my introduction to politics were those events. So thank you for inviting us all those years ago. But so you wind up then in the Senate, you move into leadership. An interesting point of note for people who are my age or younger, Republicans at different points in there controlled the Senate, correct?
We were in control when I ran and was appointed in the Senate in 1995. We were in control for the next, I guess, 6 years. And then the Democrats won. Well, first of all, they had won. They were only out of control 2 years that I was there. And then the Democrats won, and we maybe it was we were in control for 10 years. The Republicans were of the Senate, and then they won. The Democrats won both houses. In fact, it had gotten to the point as it is today. I think it's a supermajority in both the House and the Senate. It's not as much fun as in the minority. The majority controls, and we've all watched this on a national level, where the majority, they got the Speaker, the leader of the Senate, and then the leader of the House, and then the leader of the Senate, and they pretty well determine what gets called for a vote and what's going to happen. Without being, if you're not in control, you really it's very difficult to get a bill called and to get a whole lot done. You can do a lot in your district, and that's what I tried to do, is just try to help people who needed some help, who needed help with the red tape of government. And I tried to do an awful lot of that, and I had some great secretaries, Donna Johannes in my Oakville office, and a Kathy Wills down in my Carbondale office, and they were good at it too. And so when I wasn't there, they took care of it, and all of that. You often think on a basketball team or on a coaching or whatever you do, if you don't have good people around you, you're not going to be too successful. And that includes, in particular, starting with your wife.
So your time in the Senate then, I wrote down a couple of what I assume were the big ticket items that you went through. I'll have you add to this if we can here in a minute, but what was the removal of Rod Blagojevich like? When being in Springfield with that, because I believe he is the only governor in the history of Illinois to be impeached by the legislature.
I think you're right about that. Well, you could see it begin to happen. Rod Blagojevich was very. He was not a very. He was kind of reckless in what he did and said. Did he do a lot worse things than other politicians in Illinois have done, other governors have done? Probably not. He just did it and didn't care who saw it or who cared. When he tried to sell the seat of Barack Obama, if you'll remember, he had to appoint a new senator, and he kind of made that public that he, wanted a donation to his campaign. Well, another governor would have probably, you better make one, but I'm not going to tell you got to make one, that sort of thing. He was reckless and was kind of carefree. I always thought he had attention deficit disorder, and I think he did. He was a lot of fun. He knew didn't know a lot about government, but he sure did know a lot about sports trivia. He was good at it. He truly was. And there are some funny stories about him. Everybody's got one if you were there long enough. But finally, it looked like he was going to be impeached. His party protected him, as parties tend to do, as long as they could. But once they saw he was a liability, then you knew it was going to happen because they controlled the House and the Senate. And they need both of them to get that done. Republicans believed, I'm sure, that he maybe should be impeached. But once you saw the Democrats, in fact, I think there was maybe only one vote for him in the House, and that was his sister-in-law. So he, once that happened, he was going to be impeached. It was time-consuming. It was a lot of rhetoric. If there's politicians love to hear themselves talk, and there was a lot of them that got up and talked. Everybody seemed to want to say something, but it just was. It was a big deal, but it was something that was going to happen. You could see it. You could see it happening 6 months away. That it was going to happen.
Well, you mentioned the seat of Barack Obama, who was a colleague of yours in the Senate.
Right.
How many years did you serve with him?
I served with him for 6 years.
And do you have memories? I mean, it is a unique thing, irrespective of party, to have served alongside somebody who is now a former president of the United States.
Well, he was a good speaker. He was kind of dramatic when he spoke, and still is today. I think he was pretty smart. He didn't have a lot of experience. He had less experience than I had, and I didn't think I should be president. But he was pretty, he came into that job. He was going to have to learn on the job. There's no question about that. So we noticed that he did a lot of not a yes or no vote. He did a lot of present votes. That some of the tough votes he did because he didn't want. You knew he was shooting for a higher job. Probably a U.S. senator, really, is what he. I don't know if he had president in mind, but he would vote present on some of the tough votes, but spoke. He would give long speeches, and was good at that. I got to know him pretty well. In the evenings, he liked to play poker, and I enjoy playing cards. In the evenings, you eat, then what are you going to do? So I'd try to find somebody that wanted to play maybe some gin or some poker or whatever, and there were a number of people who wanted to do that. He liked to play poker, and so I played a lot of poker with him in the evenings. And when he decided to run for president, I got a lot of phone calls from like the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, and a lot of Newsweek, all of them. What kind of guy is he? We hear you play poker with him. And, they wanted something spectacular. They wanted me to say something that really caught, hey, he's terrible, he's this, he's that. And, it was just a low dollar, $5 poker game is all it was, and there was nothing to. So I really never gave them a whole lot other than the fact that, how do you tell what? Oh, one of them was, is he a risk taker? Well, how do you tell whether he's a risk taker at $5? Can he handle the pressure? You can't. So they never. I'm sure that some of them wrote some of those things down and wrote them in the paper or the Newsweek or whatever, but I never had anything that was. I guess the one thing that surprised me about him is he smoked when he played cards, and I guess he smoked as a president too, because I read that about him later on. But other than that, he wanted to talk to me when he came back after his 8 years in the presidency, mainly because we played cards together, and I gave him another deck of cards, by the way. He said.
So you met with him post-presidency?
After he was president, yeah. He came to our Capitol to give a speech, and that's how I met with him. He wanted to talk to me, and so I did, and there were a couple of other people that he wanted to talk to too, but. So I gave him a deck of cards, and he said, I don't get to use those very much anymore. So, but other than that, I often wondered, he didn't have much background to be the president of the United States. But we've had other presidents who didn't have much background either. And we didn't agree on a lot of issues. I was a Republican, he was a Democrat, he was a pretty liberal. I was fairly conservative, so we didn't agree on a lot of issues, but I did know him pretty well. And probably if I ran in to him today, he'd know me, yeah.
That's fascinating. I didn't realize that you'd had enough of a connection that he would come back and you'd give him a deck of cards.
Well, what he tried to do, I think, well, first of all, he talked about being that he was not just a Democrat, that he was a Republican. Also, that he worked with Republicans, and that was one of the examples that he gave. When he made his speech, I worked with Dave Luchtefeld. We played cards together all the time, that sort of thing. And we talked, and that's probably why. But other than that, he's a person that I knew in life and happened to become president of the United States.
So the most important question about it, though, who was the better card player?
Well, he wasn't a very good card player.
That's the answer I was looking for. Well, that's fascinating. For you, your time in the Senate, those are two huge national stories that you served alongside a president and the arrest of Rod Blagojevich, and he continues to gain media traction to this day. Mm-hmm. But what do you remember as things that stuck out for you?
Two other things that, when people ask you that, what did you accomplish? You're one of 58, 59 senators. What did you accomplish? Two things that stick out in my mind. One was the medical malpractice issue. You may be too young to remember that, but it was huge. Doctors were leaving Southern Illinois, in particular Southern Illinois. The awards were so big that, and then the cost of insurance was so high that they were going to Missouri, especially from over in the Metro East area. So we needed a bill to try to set limits on those awards. And the fellow that Frank Watson became the minority leader of the Senate, and I later became the assistant minority leader, and he appointed me to head that group that dealt with malpractice and try to get the malpractice bill through. I really worked hard at that. Doctors got involved. Doctors don't necessarily like to get involved in politics, but they did then. I'm telling you, they came out in droves, and they contacted their patients. And patients like their doctors, and they'll do what their doctor asks them. They ask their doctors ask them, get a hold of your senator or your representatives. And if I ever saw democracy work, it worked on that one bill. I've often said to my classes, if you have something that you want something done in the legislature, if enough people want it bad enough to do something about it, think about that, to do something about it, you can make it happen in a democracy. But you got to have enough people, and you have enough people who will do something about it. And these people contacted their legislators. Finally, their legislators, Democratic legislators, who were against changing the malpractice law, they didn't want to change. But we were in the minority. But enough people went to those Democratic legislators and said, you either pass it or we won't vote for you next time. And so all of a sudden, we had Democrats who were supporting the bill. And it happened. So that was huge. I felt good about that because I spent a lot of time at it. And the second thing that changed, I think, Southern Illinois a lot is the election of Judge Carmeier, Judge Lloyd Carmeier. You've heard of him.
I remember that election.
Became Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He and I were best friends. Went to high school together, did everything together. And I talked him into running for the Supreme Court. There was an opening. Most of the time, that opening would be filled by somebody from Madison or St. Clair County. It's the bottom 37 counties. But 38% of the people of the bottom 37 counties live in Madison, St. Clair County. So they can control about anything they want. And usually it would be a Democratic senator. And they had a terrible reputation, Madison, St. Clair County, of corruption in the judiciary. I would like to change that. How do you change it? Well, the election of Carmeier changed it a lot, because when he gets to be on the Supreme Court, when a Supreme Court justice walks into the courthouse in Mount Vernon or they pay attention, and he was able to appoint people to office who were honest, hardworking, fair judges, and in the process, I think he changed the court system to a better system in Southern Illinois, not necessarily controlled by Madison and St. Clair County. And I think it's a lot better system with a lot fairer judges, and I feel really good about that. Without me convincing him that he should run for office, and we had to convince him that he could win. That was the tough part, and that we could raise the money. It was the most expensive Supreme Court race in the history of of the United States. And we raised $8 million in that race, and so did the other side. So we knew it would be an expensive race, and he won. And I think once he decided I think he decided the same thing I did. You only live one time. Yeah, you know, why not go for it? And that he could win. And that was the difference, and he turned out to be a great judge. And in fact, his successor is David Overstreet from Mount Vernon. So that was huge, and that I really feel good about. And those two things were the biggest in my career. Yeah.
Nice. So as you look back at it on the political side, what's changed? And what do you think has changed for the better and the worse?
In Illinois, not much has changed. I think in Southern Illinois, the court system has changed a lot. It seems to be more fair, but Chicago still controls. You know, like for instance, in one election, Bill Rady went into Chicago 600,000 votes ahead and lost the election. They pretty well run the show. So in the state of Illinois, it hasn't changed. If there's one thing that has bothered me from before I became a state senator, for years ahead of that, we are bankrupt, and so is the United States, near bankruptcy. When you have to borrow money just to pay for this year's bills, every year, that's, you know, the state of Illinois is probably $150 billion in debt. The United States is, $37 trillion in debt. Your interest rates get so high that you can't pay the interest finally. And finally, if you can't pay the interest, you can't borrow the money to keep government running. And I contend that is our biggest problem by far in the state of Illinois and also in the United States. We have a debt problem, and how do you solve it? I don't know, because you'd have to, like for instance right now, there's an attempt to try to save money and lower but people fight it. You know, both Republicans and Democrats if you give us something, we want to keep it. And we give people more money than we take in. Every year in the state of Illinois and in the United States, we spend more money than we take in. You can only do that so long. Now, how can you change it? Well, you can, if for instance, let's say the Democratic Party said, we're going to change it. They won't get elected next time. If the Republican Party says, we're going to change it, and they start cutting back and cutting people's programs, they won't get elected. It's, I don't have a good answer for you. It isn't, I don't know how we do it before. Do we go bankrupt? I say that we finally do. When you can't pay right now, our interest on the federal government is $1 trillion, or right at $1 trillion. Think about that. That's bigger than our debt was 30 years ago. So how do you handle it? I wish I had an answer for you.
Well, I've got a couple more questions. Were you ever approached, or did you ever think about running for a different office? And you're retired now, so you can spill all of the dirt on that.
I never ever thought about running for a higher office.
Really?
No. I was not a young man anymore. I was 56 when I went in as a state senator. Plus the fact that you can't raise the money down here to run on a statewide level. And no, I never thought about running for a higher office. Was I approached? Maybe a little bit for maybe minority leader, but I didn't. That too was you know you have to be in Chicago all the time. I kind of like being at home, and that is you're not going to be able to do that if you run at a higher office. Mm-hmm. So no, I never ever wanted to do anything higher than that. Mm-hmm.
Well, Senator Luchtefeld, and I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly, is there anything else? What do you want people, when they remember your time as a coach, as a senator, what do you want people to remember as the legacy?
Well, you know, there are certain things that are, when you're completely, as you get old and as you are retired, you look back and you say, what's important? Well, you'd like to be honest, and people believe you're honest. You'd like to be a good person. You'd like to be a good husband and a good family man. You want people. You know, I often said when you go to funerals, the best thing you could say about the person is he or she was a really good person. I don't know what else would be better than that. So that's, you know, you'd like to just be, and that the world is a better place because you were there, or at least your small world was a better place. I've had a lot of help doing that. By far the most important decision I ever made, and most people's decision, is my spouse. I found a special person, Flo, who is, we were married 61 years, and it's been a fun trip.
That's wonderful. Well, Senator Dave, thank you for being on. Thank you for everything that you have done and given to Southern Illinois, and the countless lives that you have touched in a classroom, on a court, and through your acts in Springfield. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Enjoyed talking to you.
Touched in a classroom, on a court, and through your acts in Springfield. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Enjoyed talking to you.
And that's it.